Okay, folks, welcome back to another edition of My Car Guru. I was walking through the Nissan service drive here at my dealership in Greenville, and parked there is an interesting and one of my favorite cars. It's a 1978 Datsun 280Z. What's a Datsun, you ask? Well, a Datsun was what a Nissan is. But it was really Nissan back then. They just decided to use the Datsun name in America for some reason or another. But yeah, the 280Z was, well, back in the late 70s, Nissan was the enemy to me because we were a Mazda dealer. We had a Nissan, or make that a Datsun dealer. They were still Datsun, I believe, until 1981? That sounds about right. But gosh, they made some hot-selling vehicles. The Datsun 210, or B210. The Datsun 510 was always a cool little boxy. It was a little bit bigger than a 210, but it was a little boxy 2- or 4-door vehicle that is very popular today. A lot of people have fixed them up. But yeah, boxy is always popular for some reason. Then they had the different iterations of the 710, and they got away from that. 510, 710. And then they started naming their cars like Maxima and Sentra. But you know, the really only one that really meant anything to me was the 240, 260, 280Z. And then they started growing, you know, after, let's say, in the early 80s, and became ZXs, and I think most manufacturers pretty much screwed up most of their cars, started slapping V6s in them instead of the inline 6. But we were a Mazda dealer, and my first love from cars, from a car standpoint, was the Mazda RX-7. Now, we've been a Mazda dealer since 77, and in 79, late 78, Mazda decided to use the rotary engine and put it in a little, very nimble, very long-nosed, short tail-end sports car called the RX-7, and it was phenomenal from a handling standpoint. It was okay from a power standpoint. It was competitive at the time. Even though it only had 100 horsepower, it would get up and go. The 280Z that I have here only has 125 horsepower, so it's not that much more. But, you know, I was just thinking about favorite sports cars. And first I need to identify, I think, what is a sports car? So I asked the AI application that I have called Perplexity. I said, Perplexity, what is a sports car? And here's what he or she, I'm going to say it's a she, said. A sports car is a type of automobile designed primarily for dynamic performance, okay, emphasizing handling, acceleration, top speed, and driving thrill. There's nothing there that I would disagree with. Typically, sports cars are small, often two-door vehicles. Now, wait a minute. Often two-door vehicles? Folks, can a sports car be a four-door vehicle? I don't think so, but some people do. Normally, they have two seats, though some have small rear seats. I would concur, that's okay. You can put rear seats in a sports car and call it a Mustang, call it a Camaro. You can call it a 280Z or an RX-7 or a Porsche 911. They also feature, this is according to Perplexity, they also feature a firm, low suspension for better handling and larger brakes for quick stopping. Now, key traits include performance things like 0 to 60 time. That's a big deal. I remember back in the 70s and 80s, a good 0 to 60 time, a fast car, was 6.5 seconds. That was about as fast as you could get. You know, I've got a Mustang out here on my showroom floor that'll go 0 to 60 in probably 3.5 seconds, somewhere in that neighborhood. There are cars that exist that will do it in like right at 2 seconds. Can you imagine that kind of acceleration? 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. 1, 2. You're going 60. That's crazy. That is a sports car. Now, in 1953, Chevrolet took a stab at sports cars. They'd been building some pretty boring, mundane type vehicles. And then finally, somebody came up with the idea of building a two-seat sports car and called it the Corvette. And initially, the Corvette had an inline six-cylinder engine and a two-speed power glide automatic transmission or a four-speed manual transmission. And it wasn't very successful at first, but then they started improving it. When they put the V8 engine in the Corvette, it took off. Now, Ford tried to counteract what Chevrolet was doing in 1955 by coming out with the Thunderbird. And it was more of a professional man, a businessman or woman, kind of a sports car, two doors, two seats, and then it started growing. And they just totally abandoned the whole sports car theme, but Corvette stuck with it. And that was pretty much it from a domestic auto industry standpoint. But then you had Porsche, which they started selling Porsches back in the early 50s, but they weren't popular, much. And then the British invasion started to happen with the MGs and the Triumphs and all those little sports cars. The people that fought in World War II, they saw all these really cool cars in England and to some extent in France and different places, and they said, they don't sell this kind of stuff in America. And so there was a demand for, two-seater convertible, where you could just throw the convertible top back, manual transmission, something that's fun to drive, something small. And they started selling in the United States. But they weren't reliable. MG, anything from England, for the most part, had faulty electrical systems. The quality was substandard. And this same thing kind of infected the domestic automakers. Their car quality started going down, and that's where the imports started coming in. And then the RX-7 came out. The 280Z came out. But the coup de grace was in 1989, when probably the best car ever made that actually fit its purpose better than any other car ever made, including the Model T Ford. It was designed perfectly, sized perfectly, was probably the most reliable car ever made. And believe it or not, it was built by Mazda. And it was called the Miata. And it shocked the world. Best-selling two-door convertible sports car ever built. The Mazda Miata. And you know what? Mazda has stayed true to that formula. If you go drive a Miata or go to a Mazda dealership and look at a Miata and then look at an 89 Miata, you can tell they are definitely brothers and sisters. They are true to what they originally were. A reliable car that was not British. They were actually built in Hiroshima, Japan. Remember what happened there? But the Miata was so balanced, had a perfect 50-50 weight distribution with the driver. If it didn't have a driver in it, it threw it off a little bit. But you put somebody in it, which is essential, the car would have a 50-50 weight distribution. I guess maybe not if the driver weighed 300 pounds, but they couldn't fit in the car anyway. So the average person, sometimes they consider the average person a 150-pound man. I don't know any 150-pound men. That being said, the Miata was perfect. The RX-7 died. The Z car, with the new Nissan name, survived, but has done nothing but drop year after year after year in sales. Honda made a stab at it with the Honda 2000, and then they came out with a supercar called the Acura NSX, and indeed, it was a supercar. It was fast. It was mid-engine. It was gorgeous, and it drove just like a Honda Accord. I had an NSX one time, and it was just disappointing. I mean, it was incredibly fast. I mean, it had 250, 260 horsepower. It wasn't incredibly powerful. Maybe I'm off there on the horsepower, but it was not incredibly powerful. It was fast, but it drove like an Accord. It was boring to drive. That's something that the Miata has never been. It's never been boring. Even the later RX-7s were not boring. Nissans, the Z car, they became boring, in addition to becoming ugly. Now, the new Nissan Z car is beautiful, and it's a true sports car. It's got over 400 horsepower. It's got no seats in the back, and it definitely looks like a sports car. But people just don't buy, for the most part, sports cars. They just don't. I mean, look what happened to the Camaro. It's gone. No more Camaros. Mustang has hung in there, and they will, but their sales keep going down in Mustang. Honda abandoned the sports car. Toyota abandoned the sports car. They had a Scion, which they also abandoned that whole experiment. They had a pretty cool little car. I think, I don't know if Subaru still sells a version of that car. They did, I take that back. Toyota did come out with the Supra again, and it's very expensive and to my eye, not very attractive. But it's a really small market, and people just aren't interested in them anymore. All anybody wants to drive are SUVs and pickup trucks. What a boring world this has become. I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, I'm back. This week has been interesting, I hope. We have talked about 3 things you must do before you walk into a dealership. It's so important to be prepared and to be focused on what you're trying to accomplish. You're not just trying to buy a car. You're trying to buy it right. You're trying to get the lowest possible price you can get, but still get all the things that you really want, that you've been thinking about, and how important it is not to settle and to think about it, to go home and ponder what you've heard that day rather than responding. The other thing we talked about was handling major issues that you have with a dealership, especially if they sell you a vehicle with salvage history and you didn't know about it, and the importance of being cordial, calculating, and courageous. And if you want more information, or if you want to revisit that, you can go to the podcast and listen to yesterday and the day before yesterday. But today, I want to drill down a little bit further in this negotiating process and tell you about something called the first pencil. Okay? You got it? The first pencil. What is that? What does that sound like? Well, it's not like the first pencil that you're thinking about that you got when you were in the first grade. Hey, what's this? It's a pencil. No, it's not that. This is the first number that you are presented in a dealership when you're there to buy a car. So you've gone through the whole process. You've hopefully test-driven the vehicle. You've had a feature and benefit presentation. You know what the vehicle has on it. You like the color. You've pretty much made a mental commitment to buy this thing, but you haven't made a financial commitment yet. And so the salesperson is going to disappear for a few minutes. You're going to be sitting at a table in a dealership, and that guy has gone off. He's disappeared. What he comes back with is usually a piece of paper. And in the car business, and a lot of car dealerships, that's called the first pencil. And I don't know where the terminology came from, but it is a proposal. I guess they call it a pencil because, what's on the other end of a pencil? That's right, an eraser. And so this is the first presentation of price to you. And what the salesperson is hoping is that you will say, okay, that's fine, fix it up, and sign the paperwork or sign the presentation sheet that he has given you. But what I'm telling you as a car dealer, advising a car buyer, is never accept the first pencil, because that's what they want you to do. You say, no, that's too much. I think that's too much for that car. That's not enough for my trade. And sometimes this first pencil will come back to you in the form of something called the Foursquare presentation sheet. So if you just took a piece of paper and put a line from the top to the bottom and then across, that creates 4 squares. And typically these dealerships that use that negotiation technique are preying on the ignorant. Not stupid, just ignorant. And so in the upper left box, they will put the sale price of the car, or the selling price, what they're trying to sell you the car for. On the upper right box, they will put what they were paying you for your trade-in. That's their offer for your trade. In the lower left box, they will put the down payment that they want you to make. And then the lower right box, they will put either one payment or several payments. And so they present it to you in that way. That whole presentation is called the first pencil. Now, what they want you to do is focus on what? That's right, the monthly payment. They don't want you to even think about what you're paying for the car. And most people will go to that lower right box and say, well, that's too much per month. It doesn't even say on there how many months it's for. It doesn't say what the interest rate is. The down payment number that they've given you is an arbitrary number. You don't even know that down payment number has any relation whatsoever to that payment number. You don't know what the terms are of the loan. They've just written two obscure numbers down. You know what the only two numbers that matter at this point are? The one in the upper left and the upper right. What you're buying the car for and what the trade appraisal is, what they're paying you for yours. Those are the only two numbers that matter at this point. So stop negotiating payment and down payment. That's what they want you to do. Because if you do that, you don't know what you're paying for the car. You could be paying $5,000 over MSRP. Because that payment could be based on 84 months or 120 months. You don't know. It doesn't say. Now, if you go to a dealership that does it right, they're going to print out a document. They're not going to draw squares on a blank piece of paper. They're going to print out a document that has the selling price, the trade, the incentives that are being applied, the sales tax, if there's a document fee or a doc fee, any additional charges are going to be there. And then when it comes to payment, if they present payments, it'll show the down payment, it'll show the payment amount and the term. And sometimes it'll show the interest rate. Many times it does not show the interest rate. But all you have to do is ask, hey, how much is the interest rate? See, that's not hard. So the whole theory behind this is to find your hot button. So what are you going to focus on the most? I don't know what the percentages are. I hate it when people throw out percentages. But I'd say the vast majority of people focus on the wrong boxes. They're focused on the monthly payment. And that's what they want you to do. So reject that. You know, somebody brings you a Foursquare, say, I don't care about the monthly payment right now. I'm interested in what you're selling me the car for and what you're paying me for my trade, and I'm not satisfied with either of those numbers. And you need to go back to that guy that sits behind, curtain number 3 and get that price in line with what I'm seeing online, because that's not in line. I'll see you in a minute. Okay. And if it's an experienced salesperson, he may say, well, what do you have in mind? Don't fall for that, because you really do need to know what the MSRP on the car is, and you need to have done the research and know about what the factory invoice is, and you need to have already done the research on what your trade ACV is, because otherwise you're just shooting in the dark. You really don't know. So, if you're not prepared, don't go shopping. If you're prepared, sit there, you've got your numbers in front of you, but don't tell him what you want. Make him go back. Go back, get me another number. Try again. And then they come back, and they've dropped both. They've increased your trade, and they've dropped the sale price, one or the other. The trading difference has shrunk. That's what you're looking for. Now, if those numbers don't jive with your numbers, then send them back again. If it does, you can tell them that you're close, but at that point, it's not bad to go ahead and tell them, what you're willing to pay. A good salesperson may ask you, well, what are you basing that on? And you say, I'm basing it on my research, basing it on what I can get from other dealers and what I've seen online. So if you can get competitive with that, I'd love to do business with you. But if you can't, that's fine. We'll just leave. And you have to be prepared for the next words that come out of his mouth. And I'll tell you what those are here in just a second. Okay, so they've made you an offer. We got the first pencil. You said no, and you're not focused on the monthly payment. They come back with a second pencil, and you're challenging that. Finally, you tell them what you're willing to do. Here's the next thing a good salesperson is going to say. Now, a weak salesperson is going to run into the desk. Again, go behind curtain number 2 this time. But a good salesperson is going to say this. If I'm able to sell you the car for that price, are you prepared to do business today? Well, are you? Are you prepared? If you've done all your homework and the numbers look good, it's the right car, right color, everything lines up perfectly with the way you want it. Maybe you didn't get all the way there, but you got most of the way there. Are you prepared to buy the car today? Then tell them that. If you're not, this is the wrong time to be dishonest. You need to say, no, regardless of what you come back with, we're going to go and think about it, because that's what we were instructed to do by the car guru. By who? Who's the car what? And you just say, don't worry about it. Just get me the final numbers, and then we'll go home and think about it. Now, here's what the crooked dealership will do at that point. They'll say, we're not going to give you final numbers for you to just go around and shop. The honest dealership will give you the final numbers and hope that you will call them back because of their honesty. If you go out and maybe you beat their price by somebody else that doesn't do business right, I would certainly hope that you would call the dealership that was totally transparent with you and fair with you, even if though they're a little higher, that you would call them back and give them the last shot to earn your business. That's the right thing to do. And, I think that's being ethical on your part as a buyer. So it all starts with the first pencil. And you should never put yourself in a position to get a price until you're mentally committed to a particular car. Don't go into the office and start negotiating on a car you're not sure you want. That's not ethical either. Make sure it's exactly what you want. If it's not, make them find it. If they can't find it, go somewhere else. But don't waste their day negotiating with you when you have no intention on buying. I think that's rude. So I hope some of this advice is helpful. It is a pathway to a much better deal, to not screwing up and waking up the next morning and saying, what did we do? You don't want buyer's remorse on this big of a purchase. Well, thanks for listening to this edition of My Car Guru. Call me or send me a text, 423-552-2020, or send me an email to LennyLawson2020@gmail.com, and I'll talk to you next time.